Sorry, got a little carried away there. Hey guys, and welcome to Functional Print Friday, and welcome back to my shop. So for the past couple weeks, I have been waiting on the arrival of this 0.6 millimeter hardened steel hot end so that we could actually finish the prints that required the carbon fiber filled PA6 nylon material. And it has arrived and it went in with no problem. In fact, this is actually just an empty box. So let's see how we did. And here is that much awaited part, and it came out on the first try pretty much perfect. If you see, there's actually some marks on this side. I ran this side against a file just to make sure it is dead flat, because this is the side that is going to be mounting against the cross slide on the lathe. And I've already got the nuts pressed into this, both the ones here and the ones in these holes here on the side for the rail on the top. Now, unfortunately, that is where the good news ends, because we still needed to make the piece that mounts onto the carriage itself to hold the reed head, and I didn't even record the design of that. I thought that was going to be a dead simple design and print once we had this knocked out. And yeah, neither the design or the print was dead simple. I will show you the design. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show it to you this week because I can't get the thing to print in this carbon fiber nylon. I've had nothing but failures, and the failure isn't an extrusion issue. It won't stick to the bed, which kind of blows my mind, because we've printed now, I think, 5 or 6 of these in total, between, all right, well, maybe 4 actually, I guess, between the ones that I printed with a 0.4 nozzle and then this one, and no issues with adhesion at all. They all stayed stuck to the bed just fine. But the part to mount the reed head, which is this piece down here, it's basically allows mounting from this face carried down to the casting on the lathe. It won't stick. So once again, let's set this and all the frustration that comes along with it aside and instead focus on something else. All right, this is the display that I want to use for the DRO on the lathe. It's actually just a cheap Android smartphone. TouchDRO does, I want to be fair to them, they do recommend a larger display than this, but this appears to be working just fine. You do in some instances have to scroll, like up here for your saved points. You actually have to scroll to get to the delete icon, which is kind of annoying, admittedly. I wish you could reorder those. But aside from that and the small screen for typing in like measurement changes, it actually seems to be working really well. So I think I'm going to try and go with this just because I've already got it. But you know, it's not doing any good sitting here on the workbench, nor will it be much more useful just like sitting on the top of the gearbox on the lathe. So let's go figure out how we can actually get this mounted up to the lathe. Okay, so we're over here at the lathe, and this is the carriage. This is the part that moves back and forth, and moving along with it is our plumbing here for the coolant on the lathe. Now, this isn't something I frequently use, but I do certainly want to keep it there. But what I'm thinking about is, what if we just added the screen kind of right up here next to it? We can't attach it to this, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't have it sort of kind of right up next to it. And then this would also move along with the carriage. So whether we're cutting all the way up at the chuck, or we're all the way down here doing like a long threading operation, or some other operation on a much longer piece of material, we'll still have all the information that we need right in front of us. Okay, so around the back here, you can see how this guy is mounted. It's basically just clamped in there. We have a piece here with 2 bolt holes, and it is slit on this side, and this just tightens up and holds this pipe in place. Well, I found this piece of hollow aluminum tubing. I probably salvaged this from like a broom or mop or something we're throwing out. I've already cleaned up the ends, so it's nice and beveled and straight on both ends. This end is actually a little bit thicker. It's tapered. It also had a hole through it. I cut all that off, but I left a little bit of the taper, thinking that that might be useful in our design. And I'm thinking, what if we just design a bracket or a clamp, I guess, similar to this one that just has 2 holes in it. I think we could come off this side, maybe have a hole to accommodate this guy here. We're obviously not going to have room for another bolt hole, but I don't think we need it. I think if we just run the slit all the way through from this end, connecting through 2 holes, and have it solid over here, we'll still be good with just 2 bolt holes, because this bolt would end up clamping, I guess, both of these, but more so this one, and then this one would clamp this in tight. I think, at least. Anyway, I haven't 100% thought that through, but let me go up and see what I can come up with from a design perspective for this. I want to see if that's going to work before we go any further, but obviously then we need to figure out a way to actually attach the phone onto this end of the pole, because you guys know I'm not going to just like hot glue it or duct tape it up there. All right, and here is the design that I came up with for this. And the first thing I did is actually just draw the piece that's already on the machine. I just took it off, brought it up here to my desk where I could easily measure it and draw it out. And this is dimensioned exactly the same as that stock piece. I then took that and used that as a basis to just design a longer version of this with a second hole. And I think this one's 17 millimeters, this one's 19 millimeters, as those pipes are slightly different sizes, and then slid it all the way through. And I don't know for sure that this is going to work. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. I mean, as long as this hole is a tight enough dimension, since we're hinging on this end, when we squeeze this shut and we squeeze this shut, I would think that both of those pipes should be clamped tightly in there. But I guess the only thing to do is print it out and find out. So let's do that. All right, and that came out really nice. This is just in plain old PLA. This is so easy to get to. If I ever do actually have a problem with this part getting eaten up from oil or coolant on the lathe, it'll be really easy to replace. But my guess is I will probably never replace this piece as long as it does actually work. So let's see if our tubing fits in it first. I know one end of this is tapered. Yeah, I think the end with the scratches on it is the end that's not tapered. So it should slip through here. Ooh, it's a little snug. Oh, there we go. Yeah, if I just open it just a little bit, slips right in. All right, that looks good. Now, does our taper serve a purpose? Yes, you can actually see it's stopping right there. That taper is quite subtle. It's probably only maybe, I don't know, 5 or 10 thou. But it's enough that it gives us a stop, which is great, because if we keep this as the bottom end, then we'll have adjustability to raise this guy up, but it'll stop short of actually coming out of this clamp. So, all right, we got to see if our other pipe fits in here as well, and then if this is actually going to pinch both of those with still only having those 2 bolt holes. So let's go back over to the lathe and get this guy mounted up. All right, that was almost too easy. That went on really nicely, and I do actually have adjustability on each. You do kind of have to loosen up each side first if you want to adjust one, but you don't have to loosen it up much, just like a little bit, and then you loosen up this one all the way if you want to slide this guy, or you loosen up this one all the way if you want to slide this guy. So that actually works pretty well. All right, and back around at the front. Looks pretty good from up here too. So now we just need to figure out a way to get this mounted up on top of this pole. And I do already have an idea for that. Let me show you how I hold the one for the milling machine. Yeah, so the one over here for the milling machine is clearly much bigger, but I had taken a universal phone mount design and just made it substantially larger and made some adjustments to the design to allow us to mount with just zip ties to this pole. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll link that down in the description if you want to check that one out. But I think we're going to do kind of the same thing for this, but we're not going to mount to the pole like this. I want to mount at the pole at the bottom. This is much lighter. We shouldn't have a hard time actually just mounting right to the top of that pole by modifying the base. The stock design for the base of this has just a small slot actually to slip a nut into to use for a standard tripod thread. doesn't have a pipe mount at the bottom. So we're gonna have to figure out how to adapt from that standard design to a pipe, and we'll have to make sure that we have the whole thing rigid enough as well. But let me go see what I can come up with from a design perspective, and I will bring you guys back. All right, and here is the design that I came up with for this part. And you can see the first thing I did is just take the existing design of like the larger base part of that universal phone holder and just squared off the bottom. This had, again, it had like an opening for a nut to slide in to be able to attach it to a tripod. I basically just cleaned up all that geometry and turned it into a nice block. Next thing I did was just create a copy of it and bring it over, and here, if I hide this part, probably easier to see. I rounded off those corners, made it a little bit larger than the original design just so that we could get to a shape that is large enough to eventually fit over that pipe. And then I put a short dowel pin on here to key it into the other section. Now, why didn't I do this as one design? Well, this whole universal phone mount, the original designer of this went to great lengths to make the whole thing print with no supports, but this has to be, this face here on the bottom has to be flat against the bed of the printer. There's actually several pieces in here that move and slide constrained inside of each other. This whole bottom part acts like a spring so that when you put tension on the phone, this slides and holds it tightly in there. So I didn't want to try and modify this in some way to be able to print it all as one piece and get an angle in here, because I don't want to have this at eye level. This DRO is not going to come all the way up and be at the level of my eyes. It's going to be sitting much lower, so I knew I was going to need to angle the screen back so that I could easily see it. And I measured that just with an angle finder, just roughly, and I came out to like 27 degrees. I rounded it to 25, so let me bring in the other piece. And that's what this angle here represents. This is a 25-degree angle, and the pole is going to slip in down here, so this will sit back away from us by 25 degrees. And if I hide this part now, you'll see we have now a hole to receive that short dowel pin. And the idea is I'll just glue these two pieces together. I thought about having a fastener come up from the inside of this and screw into that other piece, but I think having just a single fastener in the center might allow that joint to rock a little bit. Whereas if we glue it together, yeah, it's going to be a pain to glue it together, but it's going to be a real nice firm connection between those two. So everything else here is pretty much just aesthetic. I mean, we just have rounded corners on everything as it slopes down to a large enough square shape to have that this bore in it here to slip over that piece of aluminum tubing. And I dimensioned this to be the exact same dimension as the OD of that tubing. I'm hoping that we have just a nice tight slip fit. I don't really want to attach this to the top of that tubing. If we can get this to be a nice tight slip fit, the idea is if we need to remove it, we can, and we can also swing it from side to side to adjust the angle. But we'll see how it works out. I mean, if I'm on like version 5 and I still don't have the right slip fit, I'll probably end up just gluing it in place. So, all right, let's print this piece and that piece that I had just hid. Let's print these two pieces and see how they fit together, and then we'll go ahead and print the other pieces for the universal phone holder to finish this out. All right, both those parts finished and they look pretty good. Did have a little bit of curling up here on the bottom. Probably have to add a brim to that just to get that to print cleanly, but it doesn't matter for testing. And this one, yeah, this came out nice and clean on the back. So you can see what I mean now if I hold this one up to here, why we couldn't just have this as one piece, because this needs to print flat on its back like this for all these parts to stick and work correctly, because several of these don't even join up till halfway up through this design. Since this base part moves, it's basically like a spring down there in the bottom. So let's see how these fit together. Oh, it actually fits. Well, that fits really good. All right, we're not changing that part of the design at all, but I can see we have a gap up here where it did lift up from the, yeah, it's tight on there. The gap is just at the corners where it lifted up from the bed. So let's see how it fits on the tubing. It definitely fits over it. It's a little, actually that's about right. It's, I know you guys can't feel how much force I'm putting on it to turn it, but once it's all the way down, When it's first going on, that's a little bit loose, but once we have the friction of the whole thing sliding on there, it feels pretty good. Like I can aim this, but I don't think that's gonna vibrate around. I think it's gonna stay pointed wherever we aim it. Let me grab the foam, see how that angle looks. All right, we don't have the rest of the parts here to clamp this in, but if I just gently set that there, yeah, that angle's pretty good. This is probably a little bit higher than I want it. I'll probably bring this down a little bit. Actually, let me just do that. All right, I managed to get you guys up to basically my eye height, and I brought this down quite a bit, and that is like perfect. It's right at about the height that I want to be, and the angle is pointing straight at the height that the camera's at, which is the same height that my eyeballs are at. So, all right, I think that's good. So next step, we need to actually print the rest of the pieces for this. And I think I might do the knob in like that same blue that we did the DRO stop in, and maybe this piece down here in that blue as well. Get those parts printed out, I'll bring you guys back. All right, everything printed out perfect, and I love this, this color. This is the same stuff I used in last week's video for the DRO stop. This is, I think it's the matte navy blue PLA from Everyone. I'll link it down in the description below. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite colors for functional prints because I don't like colors that stand out. I don't like it to scream, hey, I'm 3D printed or I'm plastic. I like it to just, you know, kind of blend and look nice, and this just does that really well. It's just like a really nice, like muted, dark color. So, all right, let's see how it all fits together. Yeah, that looks really good. Obviously, we have to glue these two together. We'll use the gloop for that. And I like the sort of accent up here and down here. I just think that looks neat. So let's go, you know what, before we glue this, let's actually go try it on the pole, make sure that our different color here didn't change our inside dimension on this bore. All right, that fits on there really nice. It's actually a little bit more snug on this tubing than the black one was, but not so snug that I still can't re-aim it. So I think that's good. I don't want to mess with this anymore until we actually glue those two pieces together, because I can just see knocking this phone off and then not having a display at all. But I gotta tell you, like first look, really liking that. Let's get that glued together. All right, I've got you guys off to the side so that I can be right in front here and see what I'm doing. I have a very love-hate relationship with this stuff. It glues together, at least PLA parts, incredibly well. Everything I've tried before this stuff just didn't really work. Super glue, it kind of works. Rubber cement kind of works. Shoe goo kind of works. They've all failed on me. The bond of this stuff is incredible for PLA. It's also really a pain to work with. It's hard to describe the viscosity of this stuff other than annoying. And then it sets up fast. So it's very runny, but then it sets up quickly. So on a part like this, oh, and it changes, of course, it's going to change the surface of this and make it look different if we get glue on it. So it's not like we can just put a bunch on there, gloop it all over, like the name, squeeze it together and then wipe off the excess, because it'll look terrible. It's going to look like a toddler did it. So what I've got to do is get enough on there that we get a nice strong bond, but not so much that it squeezes out. So yeah, wish me luck. I wonder if I cut like half the bristles off of an acid brush like this, if that's going to make it easier to work with. Because I was thinking this would be easier than the brush in here, but I'm just realizing that they're almost the same brush. I've used a Q-tip before too. That works really well for tiny parts. But it's going to be too small for this. It's going to, what I start dabbing on there with the Q-tip is going to set up before I get enough glue on there. So let me try cutting half the bristles off one of these brushes. All right, I ended up actually cutting about 2/3 of the bristles off, or at least it seemed like it when I was over there at the garbage can. Here on the camera it looks like half, but I cut off more than half. Let's see how this works. All All right, well, there is a fine line between too much and not enough, and I was a little bit on the too much side of the line, and also we have a tiny gap there. I could maybe fit a sheet of paper, maybe. I can't even really pick it up on camera. I mean, you know, from the angle that we're going to see it at, it looks great, but yeah, if that bothers me, I may end up printing another one. All right, and that looks really good. I mean, I guess it pretty much looks the same as it did before we glued it together, but I did offset it to this side a little bit when I popped it in the mount. I realized pretty much like the same as I do for the one in the milling machine, there's no reason it has to be centered in this. We can offset it a bit and get it over closer to the position that we're going to be working in. So I'm standing in the position where I would use the hand wheels here on the lathe, and that is pretty much dead on. I like it. See how it works. A tiny bit of wobble. Strangely only in the one direction, and that's probably due to my uneven cranking here on the hand wheel. My guess is with the power feed on the lathe, that's probably going to be perfectly smooth. Let's see how it is for typing, because for our X as an example, and Y as well, we're probably going to want to enter a dimension. So X, if we've measured our diameter, we know it's, I don't know, 2 inches. We're going to have to type that in. Yeah, that's perfectly usable. It actually feels really stable. I mean, I can flex it, but it is surprisingly stiff for being that far up off the mount. All right, well, once again, I find myself saying that I think that is as far as we can go on this project until we get that part to successfully print out. We got this one's good to go now, but the part that holds our reed head down onto this casting, I've just got to figure out how to get that to stick to the bed. I do have an idea. I think there's maybe something obvious that I am missing that has to do with following the actual directions again. But yeah, you guys will find out in next week's video. And I'm really happy with how this came out. I wasn't even sure if I was going to do the mount for this right away or just kind of live with having the screen sit over here on the headstock and be hard to read and at least have everything all back together. But it is awesome to see that sitting up there and done. Guys, as always, thanks for hanging out in the shop with me for this week's design and video. This ended up being pretty easy. All of these parts actually worked on the first version of the design and on the first try for all the prints. So that was a nice change of pace from the challenge that we've had with all of the other parts, particularly just getting the parts to print in that carbon fiber nylon material. If you enjoyed this video, if you get anything out of it at all, take a second, hit that like button. It really helps out the channel, costs you nothing, and it also tells YouTube the kind of stuff that you like to see. And if this is by chance your first time on the channel, I do a new video like this every single Friday. It's often out here in the shop, but I do stuff outside and around the house as well. If you like that sort of thing, check out some of my other videos. And if you like those as well, consider hitting the subscribe button. And guys, if you do, I'll see you next Friday.